Hey folks, Diso here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about DIY garage shelves. Now, if you're looking to build some shelves like this and you're at all like me, you've probably already watched 10 plus different videos on how to make them. Now, let me start out by letting you know that this is not another tutorial video with free plans in the description below, so why should you watch it? Great question. And the answer is that I'm not a pro. I don't do this for a living. I have almost no experience doing this kind of stuff. Instead of trying to teach you how to do something that I'm not qualified to do myself, let me instead show you some of the mistakes that I made and some of the things that I learned through this process that I didn't pick up from watching other YouTube videos that made it look super easy. Now, don't be afraid to build some shelves like these on your own. It is actually really easy. Just, it could be even easier for you if you learn from some of my mistakes. Take a look. Okay, let's build some shelves. But where are my gloves? Seriously? I swear I just had them. Alright, let's get started. For material selection, I went with this 1/2" OSB. It's not as pretty as normal plywood, but it's about 1/3 the cost. Yeah, give it a good kick. That's always good. So the first extra thing you might need is a large cutting edge like this one that I'll be clamping down and able to run my circular saw down it in a very straight line. Now, if you feel confident, you could probably just do it yourself, but I wanted to purchase one of these and make sure that it was nice and straight. This was about $25. When you're setting up your straight guide here, make sure that you include that little bit of a distance from the blade itself of your circular saw to the edge of its guide in order to make sure that your blade is cutting at the exact location you want it to be. For me, I believe my blade is about 1 1/4 inches away, so if I wanted these to be perfectly split in half at 24 inches, I would measure to 25.5. Let's measure and see. I did it! Okay, so now for our first lessons learned, if you will. A little safety tip here. Always really pay close attention to exactly where your cord placement is. Obviously, you don't want to cut it, so that's what I was going for here, to try to get it pretty far out of the way of the cutting path. My cord is around the corner of the board there, and it gets caught, as you see. It took me probably way too long to realize what had happened. Let's just fix that. Now feast your eyes on this super high-tech miter saw station. I use a few 2x4s to prop up the one I'm trying to cut. Here's one laid across to use as a stop, and then I've got one clamped to another one. It's just, yeah. If you're thinking this probably wouldn't really work, it didn't. Now we'll see the failing of my stop, or my not stop. When I try to put it in place here, I go to, my saw moves a little bit, and I feel like I've moved the stop. I go over and I check, and it has moved a little bit. Instead, I'm just gonna measure. These are 10-foot 2x4s. I want them to be 8 feet long, so I'll just cut off 2 feet. Okay, I'm just going to jump in here and talk about a little technical difficulties I had. The camera that I use is a point and shoot camera that's really intended for just taking some pictures. I was using it for video and the battery died. I didn't have a spare, but I wanted to keep working, and I just wasn't able to film the next couple of steps. I went through and I cut all of the pieces of 2x4 to the appropriate sizes, and then I started to assemble them into frames. Now, the basic construction of these shelves is that you build a frame, you have some support pieces going across, You mount those to the wall, give them some vertical supports, and then you put your plywood on for the shelf. On YouTube, there are plenty of different methods of building the frames or assembling them on the walls. One method would be to put a 2x4 directly onto the wall and then to attach the supports to it and then the further out 2x4. One method would be to build the complete frame before you put it up onto the wall. And you could do what I did, which is sort of a hybrid method where I built roughly half of the frame, take the long 2x4 that would be attached to the wall, put all of the cross supports onto it, mount that up, and then put the front piece on. After that, I could put up some vertical supports and lay the shelves down. The reason I didn't use the method where you would just place the long 2x4 on the wall in the perfect location and then attach the arms is because I didn't have a pocket hole jig at the time. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the video. The issue with building the entire frame itself and then mounting it to the wall is that it's going to get pretty heavy, and if you're trying to do this entire process by yourself, you're going to encounter problems trying to lift that up and attach it. But you're going to have that problem either way. You'll see. So here I'm just trying to set the height for the shelf itself. I would definitely recommend that you spend a little bit more time on this part of the process. Just make sure that you are going to have your shelves evenly spaced. So this is one of the first very unnecessary steps that I completed. I drew a level line at the right height across. I thought it would help me to line up the board, but I really didn't end up using it at all. Be to mount another 2x4 by itself on the wall, perfectly level, just below where you want your permanent board to be, and then rest the entire assembly on top of that and secure it. It'll be level and it will be held in place by the other board. Much easier than what I just went through. I used a spare 2x4 to mark all of the stud locations, and then I placed the next assembly adjacent to it, and I was able to easily transfer the stud locations to the new assembly and get some screws started so they'd be easier to drill in once the whole frame was up against the wall. So you might notice here that the top two shelf spacings is a little bit different than the other two. A little bit of a design flaw there. We'll call it a safety feature. It promotes me from not putting items up there that are too heavy. I had a screw get real hot, totally burned out. I'm pretty confident that I drove it into an existing drywall screw. Now I'm attaching the front part of the apron. I don't know. This definitely made it a little bit easier. I'm not sure if just building the shelves completely and putting them up or doing it the way that I did it would have been easier, but I felt like this way worked pretty good for me. Now I'll start putting in my vertical supports. Got one screw in and worked on making sure that it was level. And then just went up and down. I only put this first one in for right now because I wanted it to be on this side to have a little bit more access. And if I put in all of the front supports, then I wouldn't be able to get my shelves in. So get the shelves in, screw them down with, get this, more deck screws. After all of the shelves were good and secure, I started to put up this next vertical support. I'm doing the one all the way at the other end because I want to use a container that I have purchased, and then I will position them and verify that I can fit two of them side by side in the opening, and I can move that middle support left to right a little bit if I need to. Ultimately, I ended up deciding to let these hang off the edge a little bit to do them in the other orientation so that I could fit 4 across instead of just 3, and 2 fit on either side of the middle support. Worked out pretty nice. Some of the things that I would definitely do differently if I were to repeat this process would be to commit to one method or the other instead of trying a sort of in-between method. As you saw in the video, trying to hold on to the cross supports with just having some different screws in the side, it was a little janky. Had I built the entire frame and then tried to put that up by myself, it may have been a little bit too heavy, but I don't know if it would have been that much different. I also probably would have been able to make them quite a bit more square. If you have to do this project on your own, I think that the best method would be to put the long 2x4 up onto the wall exactly where you want it to be, and then to mark where you want all of your supports to be and come in and mount those supports up using pocket hole screws. I now own a pocket hole jig because I've discovered how incredibly useful they are and simple. So when you're thinking about the cost of something like this, if you already have a drill and a driver, you only need a drill, but the combo is nice, and you already have a circular saw, then you don't really need that many more tools to complete this job. So you're talking about buying a stack of 2x4s, which are not that expensive, and a couple of sheets of OSB. One of the gotchas might be the screws themselves. A lot of people might just say, I use these because I had them laying around. Now, I didn't have a whole lot of screws laying around because this is one of my first real builds or projects. So you saw me using a big bucket of screws in the video, and I believe that bucket of screws, which I still have a ton of and is going to last me for a long time, was about $30. And I ended up needing 2 or 3 different sizes of screws, so I spent about $60 on screws. Now I have a whole lot of extra screws that I can use on future projects. Well, that's it for my first video. Pretty simple project. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. If you're curious to see what project I'm working on next, or you want to see how I will progress over time, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any pointers or safety tips, feel free to leave them in the comments. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.